Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, Deletion, by 2021 Night. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin Chapter 1, Quirk. It was early in the morning and the sun was just rising on July 15th. A small white chimera was walking towards his school in his tiny black suit, but at the doorstep of the great UA was a little red basket. Nezu rushed up to the basket and saw a small infant inside the basket. The infant only looked about 3 months old and had green hair and what seemed like glowing emerald eyes, which were staring straight at him with confusion. He immediately picked up the basket with the child inside and brought him into UA. Once getting into his office, Nezu, not knowing what to do, he tried to find any clue to why and who left the child in front of UA. He took out the infant and placed him on top of his desk while he went through the basket. Nezu took out all of the blanket in the red basket, and found a note at the very bottom. He read the note and it said, "Hello to any person who is reading this, I hope you are one of the heroes in the UA staff, because if you aren't, please hand my son over to them. You see, I am the mother of this small infant and I am afraid that I will no longer be able to look after him. Villains are after him. You must be wondering why villains are after him. It's because this child is a very special and unique. He was born with a quirk and it's very dangerous. If fallen to the wrong hands, society would be doomed. I will not mention his quirk in this letter, but if you are one of the heroes, you would be able to ask for a quirk check on this child. Anyway, for the reason why I can no longer look after this child is because after you read this letter I will probably be dead. If you're wondering about his other family, his father was killed a month ago, while our relatives are also dead. He is truly alone, so please find him a good family that will protect him well instead of mistreating him after finding out his quirk. His name is Izuku. Please take good care of him. From his mother." "Oh dear!" Nezu exclaimed. He looked towards the baby called Izuku. "It seems like we have a mystery about you. Well, I guess the wisest thing would be to check your quirk, but Recovery Girl isn't here yet. So what to do now?" Nezu picked up the infant and it looked up to him. The confusion face that the child had, so turned into one with a pure smile. Nezu smiled back and they just kept staring at each other until it was 8 a.m. Teachers started to pour into the school to get ready for their lessons, and that meant Recovery Girl would be in the infirmary. Nezu held the child in his paws and walked through the hallway with a giggling baby in his hands. Once they reached the infirmary, Nezu knocked onto the door. "Knock knock, are you inside, Recovery Girl?" he asked. "Yes, you can come in," she replied. Nezu slid the door open and Recovery Girl turned her chair towards the door. Nezu closed the door and walked towards Recovery Girl. "Nezu, why do you have an infant in your paws?" asked Recovery Girl, who was quite shocked that the principal had a child. He answered, "Well, you see, I found this child in front of the school when I reached it and I want to check his quirk." Recovery Girl questioned, "What quirk?" "Children only get their quirk once they turn 4. Nezu sighed and handed her the letter he found. Recovery Girl read through the letter and once she finished, she placed it on her desk. "I see. Well then, let's check his quirk then," she said as she hopped off her chair and walked towards the two. Nezu handed her the child, but the child stopped smiling and wouldn't let go of his suit. Nezu tried to push him off, but the child continued to hold on to Nezu like his life depended on it. Once Recovery Girl and Nezu finally got him off, Recovery Girl went to check his quirk. When they were done, Recovery Girl handed the boy back to Nezu. "It seems the boy really likes you, Nezu," she commented. "It seems so," Nezu responded while looking back down to the child, who was cuddling Chloe towards him. "Anyway, the results of the scan has come in," she said as she printed out a piece of paper. Recovery Girl read through the results and her eyes widened. "Nezu, I think it's best if a hero looks after the child," she stuttered. Nezu looked confused. "Why? Is there a problem?" he asked. Well, Nezu took the piece of paper Recovery Girl had just given him. It had, name, Izuku, age, 3 months birthday, unknown quirk, deletion. What Quirk does, his quirk can take away any quirk from existence and it can never be returned. For this to be required, he needs to see the person, but for mutant-type quirks, he needs to touch the target. Drawbacks, takes energy. Oh my, this boy is going to be a target. No wonder why the mother left him in front of UA. Nezu said. What are we going to do now, Nezu? Well, we have to find a pro hero that will look after him. He answered. Recovery Girl replied, but pro heroes are busy with their hero duties. What then? Nezu sighed and looked at the now sleeping boy in his arms. The boy really felt safe around Nezu, since he was asleep in his arms even though he was in a strange and unfamiliar place. Nezu thought about what he was about to do might change his life. I will look after him, he announced. Recovery Girl was frozen. Nezu, the person who hates humans because they did horrible things to him in the past, was going to look after a human child. Is this really safe? Recovery Girl thought. Are you sure, Nezu? She asked out loud. Yes, I will look after the child, he repeated. All Recovery Girl could do was nod, and with that, Nezu walked out with his new adopted son. Nezu headed back into his office and laid the small bean down in the basket covering him in blankets and continued to do his job. The students were just coming into the school and Nezu was already tired, but knew that things were going to be more tiring from now on. Chapter 2, On board. When UA was on its lunch break, Nezu decided to go and have his cup of tea. Once he saw that the green-haired baby was awake and watching him without making any sounds, it surprised him. It suddenly made him remember that he was going to be looking after the child. He still needed to fill in all the paperwork, but he forgot something important. He didn't know how to take care of a human child. He was Nezu, the most intelligent thing in the world, yet he didn't even know how to look after a human infant. What do they eat? What do I need to buy to look after it? What is dangerous for the child? Nezu thought, with many other questions running through his head. Nezu lowered his head and saw papers on his desk. He looked through them and saw a name on the sheets of paper. Tensei Iida. If I remember correctly, he has a younger brother that should be at least Izuku's age. Maybe he knows what I should do, Nezu thought. Nezu spoke through the speakers and called Tensei Iida to his office. Meanwhile, with the student and his friends he just called, they were freaking out of what he might have done this time to be called by the principal. Tensei and his friends all went through the hallways of the school and to the principal's office. They knocked on the door twice and heard a voice telling them to come in. Once they pushed the door, they saw a chimera sitting on a chair behind a desk with a smiling green-haired child in his lap. Welcome, Tensei, I see you brought your friends with you. Nezu welcomed as he stared towards Namuri Kayama, Hisashi Yamada and Shoto Aizawa. They all sweat dropped and Tensei decided to break the tense in the air by asking why he was called for. Nezu simply answered, well, you see, I am having trouble and I need your help. Maybe your friends could also help, Tensei. The students were stunned. They caused trouble everywhere, since they had a lot of different personalities in the group, which pretty much attracted trouble, and yet the principal was asking them for help. What do you need you with, sir? Asked Aizawa. Nezu smiled and his head faced towards the child who was clueless on what was happening in the room. The students followed his gaze and it also landed on the child. Knowing that he was being looked at, he returned a huge, bright smile towards the newcomers. Too bright, they thought as they squinted their eyes. As you see, I have a child with me. This is going to be my adopted son, but the thing is that I don't know how to look after a human child, and I remembered that you, Tensei, have a younger brother that should be around his age. So I have asked you to help me. Nezu explained. I see, so we have to teach you how to look after a human child? Asked Tensei. Nezu nodded and said, also for you to look after him when I am busy, of course, since I have work as well. If you refuse, that's your choose, but you have to do a punishment for all the trouble you have caused. The group gulped. That would be a lot of punishments. Hisashi and Namuri dragged Aizawa and Tensei everywhere to hang out, but they always ended up as a disaster. This was their chance to get away from things for now, so they all accepted. "That's what I like to hear," exclaimed Nezu. "Now, any questions?" Aizawa asked. "Nezu, if you are busy and we have class, what are we going to do with the child?" "Well, I will inform the teachers soon and you will excused from your class, but you will have to catch up on lessons in your own free time." Nezu responded and Aizawa nodded. Hisashi spoke up and asked, "Nezu, why are you adopting this child even though you know you will be busy?" "Well, you see, what I am about to tell you must not leave this room, you understand?" Nezu said with his smile gone and with a cold tone. The students shivered, but nodded knowing that this might be really serious. This child is a special and unique. He was born with a quirk and his quirk is really dangerous, Nezu explained. He needs to be protected by pro-heroes because villains might be after him because of his quirk. If fallen in the wrong hands, the world will be doomed. Before you ask, he has not been taken in by other pro-heroes because they might see him differently because of his quirk and they are busy all the time with their duties, while me on the other hand, can look after him in my house and at school, since I don't go around saving people. The students just nodded to every word he said and wondered what his quirk might be. They were all first years in UA and they never heard about someone being born with a quirk before. "May I ask what his quirk is and what it does? Since we will be looking after that cute bean, we might need to know what might happen when he activates his quirk," questioned Namuri. Nezu sighed. "I will tell you, but remember not to mention this to anyone and not to look at him differently." Nezu hesitantly spoke. "His quirk is Deletion. His quirk gives him the ability to erase quirks." "But sir, that is exactly like Shoto's quirk. Why would it be dangerous?" Hisashi said. "It is like Aizawa's, but it's best if he has a quirk-canceling bracelet because it can do more damage than Aizawa's quirk," Nezu explained. Tensei replied, "Sorry sir, but please explain in more detail." Nezu nodded and responded. "His quirk, Deletion, can delete a quirk or erase it out of existence permanently and it can't be undone. Its only drawback is that it will take his energy. Once he looks at his target, he can take their quirk, and for mutant quirk users, he just needs to touch them to delete their quirk." There were a few gasps. Aizawa was shocked that his jaw dropped. Someone had a quirk that could do that. No wonder Nezu said that. His quirk is really dangerous and terrifying, thought the group. Aizawa grinned knowing that there was someone who had a similar quirk than he did and stated, "Don't worry Nezu, we wouldn't see he differently. Even if he has a dangerous quirk, he is still a child that needs to be raised properly and he could one day become a hero just like us." The rest agreed with his little speech and just like Izuku understood, he gave them another bright smile, warming the hearts in the room. They all thought, "We will protect this child, no matter the cost." Nezu was glad that his 4 students wouldn't look at Izuku differently from a normal child, but he wondered what the other UA staff's reaction to when they find out about Izuku and his quirk. He could only hope that they were good. After, Nezu and Tensei talked about what a child would need for them to grow up while Namuri, Hisashi and Aizawa were looking after the kid in the corner that kept giggling at Namuri and Hisashi's little games of peekaboo. Aizawa just stared fondly at the kid and saw a quirk-canceling bracelet on his right wrist. As the day was coming to an end, Tensei and his group of friends went home and so did Nezu and his little follower. Chapter 3, Babysitting. Once Nezu entered his house, he placed the sleeping child on the couch in his living room. The house was white and had plain, colored furniture. While the baby was sleeping on the couch, Nezu walked up to his study and sat at his desk. The adoption papers he had asked Recovery Girl to gather, was now being filled out by the Chimera and he went through it quickly. After talking with Tensei, he now knew what the little guy needed to eat and how to look after him. He looked back at the notes he had taken when Tensei was explaining what he needed to do and buy. Once all the paperwork for the child was done, Nezu hopped on over to the sleeping child and saw a small smile. He returned the smile to no one in particular and brought the child into his room, so he could monitor him. The next day, was luckily the weekends, so that gave him the time he needed to go shopping. Nezu woke up and saw the peaceful face beside him. He quickly hopped off the bed and grabbed his phone. He decided to call Aizawa to look after the child, since it was early in the morning and the child should be able to sleep in peace without having Namuri and Hisashi making noise. Tensei was probably looking after his brother, since his parents were busy being heroes. The phone ringed once, then twice, and then it was answered by the quiet one in the students' group. "Hello." Aizawa whispered. "Hello, Aizawa. I need you to come over to my place and look after Izuku while I go shopping. Is it okay for you to come over?" Nezu chimed. Aizawa groaned and asked, "Why call me and not the others?" Nezu replied, "Izuku is sleeping and is peaceful. I know how loud and noise Namuri and Hisashi are, and I'm pretty sure that Tensei is looking after his younger brother." "Fair point," Aizawa stated. "But can I sleep over there?" "Sure. As long as you look after him when he wakes up, so you can sleep when he is sleeping," Nezu confirmed. "Fine, when do you want me over, and please send me the location?" Aizawa answered. "Please come over straight away, and I already sent you my address," Nezu commented. Aizawa sighed. "I am coming over now." Nezu hung up and decided to get ready for his shopping trip. He grabbed shopping bags, his keys, and the list of things Tensei told him to buy. 10 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Nezu walked over to the door and greeted Aizawa. "Hello, Aizawa." "Hi, Nezu. So where is the kid?" Aizawa asked. "He's in my bedroom, fast asleep." "Aizawa, do you know what to do?" Nezu questioned. Aizawa nodded. "This isn't my first time babysitting. I normally babysit children around my neighborhood with Hisashi and Namuri." "That's good to hear," Nezu exclaimed. "You can sleep while he is sleeping, but please be awake to look after him when he's awake." Aizawa nodded again and entered Nezu's house. He looked around the living room and the bedrooms. He found where everything was and headed back to Nezu. "How long do you think you'll be out?" questioned Aizawa. "Probably 3 to 4 hours at most." "Okay, have a nice shopping spree." Aizawa waved at Nezu as he was left alone in his principal's house. He thought to himself, "What have I gotten into this time?" He strolled towards the bedroom where the kid slept and saw the child curl himself into a little ball to keep himself warm. Aizawa smiled to himself and heard his phone ring. Aizawa picked up the phone and answered. "What?" "Hey Shota. How is everything at school going?" asked the mysterious voice. "Fine. How's your internship going, Oboro?" The voice over the line cheered, "Everything's going great. I saw some villains and the heroes I'm interning with fought them, but I had to watch from the sidelines though. It was amazing. Once the battle finished I was determined to work harder, but anyway I was wondering what you and the others are doing." "We're fine, but I'm not with the others right now," Aizawa replied. Oboro laughed. "Yeah, you probably kicked them out when they came over to your house and woke you up." "Actually, no. Nezu woke me up and told me to babysit," Aizawa whispered. "What? Why would Nezu call you at 7 a.m. to babysit? He doesn't even have a child," Oboro said confused. Aizawa sighed. "You don't know what happened yesterday. You better come back and you might get into the fun. I can tell you this. I am babysitting his son and he's very adorable." "Oh. I guess I do need to hurry and see the boy, since the great Shoto complimented him," teased Oboro. "Ha. Ha," Aizawa said as he rolled his eyes. Oboro responded, "Can you please send me a photo of the little bean?" "Fine." Aizawa took a picture of the sleeping child and sent it to Oboro. After it was sent, there was squealing from the other side. "So cute. So you better come back quickly or Hisashi and Namuri will try and keep him," Aizawa said. "That's it, I am coming right now, send me the address. Oboro demanded. Oh hell no, you still have the internship and you will make the same amount of noise the other two would do. I don't want to die today, so no. Also, I don't want Izuku's sleep to be ruined like mine. Aizawa lectured. Oboro booed Aizawa and they talked about the conditions of looking after Izuku, but of course Aizawa didn't say anything about his quirk yet. After talking, Oboro told him he had to go and slowly he hung up. It was 8 a.m., so Aizawa had spent 1 hour talking to Oboro and now he was going to sleep. He sleep on the floor of the bedroom, since it would be weird for him to sleep on his principal's bed without permission. After about 2 hours of sleep, Aizawa had awoken and wondered if Izuku was still sleeping, but to his surprise he saw a pair of emerald green eyes staring at him in silence. Aizawa backed away from the child surprised. Normally when children wake up, they would be making noise that would awake Aizawa from his sleep, yet Izuku didn't make noise like he just wanted him to continue sleeping. Izuku, were you watching me sleep because you didn't want me to be disrupted? Asked Aizawa, but after he asked the question, he felt stupid. A child shouldn't be able to understand what he was saying, much less respond. But after a few seconds Izuku just nodded, surprising Aizawa more. Before Aizawa could ask another question, the door unlocked and Nezu came into the room. Aizawa turned towards Nezu and got off from the ground. Welcome back Nezu. It's good to be back. Replied Nezu and he walked towards Izuku. Izuku stretched out his arms and wrapped them around Nezu. Nezu happily returned the hug and Aizawa took pictures to show his friends. After taking a few pictures, Aizawa placed his phone in his pocket and spoke. Nezu, sorry to ruin the moment, but how old is Izuku again? Nezu faced Aizawa and answered, he is 3 months. May I ask why you asked the question? I already told you yesterday. Aizawa replied, well you see, before you came in, I was asleep but when I woke up Izuku was already staring at me. For normal children who are his age, shouldn't he been making noises or crying? I asked him if he let me sleep and he nodded. So, maybe he has high intelligence. Nezu was silent and faced towards the person who was still hugging him. Well they boy was born with a quirk and that was unusual, so who can't say that he also has a high IQ? Well then, why don't we check? Asked Nezu. Chapter 4, Test. The three of them headed towards the living room and Nezu sat on a high chair while Aizawa was standing and held Izuku. They knew that Izuku couldn't talk but he could respond by nodding or shaking his head. Nezu pulled some papers from the drawers in his desk and found a range of questions. Okay Izuku. I will read out the question and you have to nod if you agree or shake your head if you don't. Okay? Nezu asked. Izuku nodded his head at Nezu's question. Okay then. Izuku is 25 times 4. Izuku nodded and Nezu continued with the math questions. Some of the questions, Aizawa didn't even know how to solve and his sweat dropped when a baby could answer them all correctly. After the math questions, they moved on to other questions. If there was a battle between Aizawa and Hisashi, who will win? Nod for Aizawa and shake for Hisashi. Izuku nodded his head again and got all of them correct. After the little IQ test was done, it was lunch time. Nezu hopped off his seat and patted Izuku to congratulate him for getting all the answers correct. Nezu manically grinned and giggled. Little Mouse is also a genius and he will have a higher IQ than me when he grows up. He's going to be like his father when he grows up and help me rule the world. I can't wait for it to happen. I will teach him many things later on. He doesn't even need to go to school, I will just teach him myself. Aizawa, who heard all of that, sweat dropped and thought, I better raise Nezu Jr. good and hope he won't out like his father. I need to inform the others about this. Once Aizawa thought about his friends, he remembered the Oboro also wanted to look after Nezu Jr. and asked Nezu if Oboro could join their babysitting club. Nezu agreed and said that the same rules applied to him as well. Now, all that was left to do was tell Oboro about the little guy's quirk when he gets back from the internship. Nezu invited Aizawa for lunch and he happily agreed. They all sat at the dining table with Izuku sitting on the left to Nezu with his new baby chair that Nezu bought on his trip earlier, while Aizawa was sitting across from Nezu. Nezu had bought fried noodles for lunch, which Aizawa was happy to eat, since he hadn't have anything to eat. It was for him to watch Nezu mouth-feeding Izuku, while he turned to his notes he took to see if he was doing it correctly. Aizawa took videos and sent it over to his friends. They immediately saw it and started to spam the chat of idiots. Cockatoo, hey. You didn't tell us you were looking after Izuku. Sleeping gas, no far Shoto. Cloud, I would be there if you tell me where Nezu's house is. Cockatoo, Nezu's house. Sleeping gas, Nezu's house. Engine, are you over there because Nezu had to go shopping for the stuff he needed? Hobo, yes. Sleeping gas, what? Why didn't he call US? Cockatoo, yeah why? Hobo, maybe because it was 7 a.m. in the morning and the child was still asleep and he didn't want loud idiots waking him up. Also Oboro, Nezu said you can join us with looking after Izuku. Cloud, hell yeah. Cockatoo, HUI. We're not that loud. Right Namuri. Sleeping gas, yeah that's right. Engine, says the ones who would squeal over the child and might make him cry. Hobo, also we found out that Izuku is a genius and can understand us, but he doesn't understand some words. Cockatoo, what? How did you find that out? Hobo, I fell asleep when I was watching him sleep and when I woke up, I saw him staring at me without making a noise. I found it weird, so I asked him a question and he nodded. After that, Nezu came back and tested Izuku and he got all of the questions correct. Some of the questions were higher than high school level, yet he answered him correctly. Sleeping gas, scary Hobo, if you think that's scary, then you don't want to know what Nezu plans to teach him when he gets older. Cloud, what is he going to do? Hobo, he's going to raise a Nezu Junior engine. Sleeping gas, Cloud, Cockatoo, engine, hopeful we can stop that while we look after him. Cockatoo, yes, we need to stop that at any cost. Sleeping gas, he's going to taint the innocent bean. Cloud, says you sleeping gas, shut up. Hobo, be careful, Nezu even admitted it himself that Izuku is going to be smarter than him once he grows older. Engine, maybe once he grows up, having people his age might help him into not becoming Nezu Jr. I could bring my brother over once they're older. Cockatoo, that's a great idea Tensei. Sleeping gas, it truly is. He can make friends at his school as well. Hobo, he's not going to school. Cloud, what? Why? Hobo, have you forgotten? He is smarter than us. Why would he go to school for? Cloud, right engine, I think one friend should be fine for now. Cockatoo, we can help him make friends later on. Hobo, what happens when we become pro-heroes then? We would be too busy with hero work. That's one of the reason why Nezu decided to adopt him. Also having too many friends aren't good. What would happen if they turn on him when they find out his quirk? Engine, Cockatoo, sleeping gas, Cloud, you don't have to worry about that. He will get his quirk once he turns 4. Hobo, right, you don't know. Cloud, don't know what? Sleeping gas, come back from your internship and Nezu will explain it to you. Cloud, then soon. Right after the weekends, I should be finished with it. Engine, alright, we will see you then. I have to go now, I'm looking after Tenya. Cloud, okay, see you later. Hobo, I'm going off as well, I am going to spend time with Izuku. Sleeping gas, hey, since he is awake can't you send us the address? Hobo, fine, but Oboro, you better not come over. Cloud, okay mum. Cockatoo, hurry and send us the location. Hobo, whatever. Hobo has sent location. Aizawa looked back to the family of 2 and showed a tiny smile. After lunch, Aizawa had Izuku in his lap and was playing cat videos on his phone in the living room, while Nezu was preparing to tell the other teachers at the school about Izuku. Then there was a knock on the door. Aizawa placed Izuku aside and continued the cat video, but Izuku lost all interest and was wondering what his comfortable seat was doing. He followed Aizawa with his gaze and saw two familiar faces at the door. Hisashi, Namuri. Remember that you are at your principal's house, so don't make a mess. Aizawa explained. Yeah. Now, where's the bean? Namuri asked. Aizawa sighed. He's in the living room watching cat videos. With that, Hisashi and Namuri raced to the living and was met with a pair of emerald eyes staring at them. They shivered. It was like they were being studied by the child. Namuri and Hisashi froze and Aizawa wanted to see what stopped them all of a sudden, but was also met with a stare. He sighed and walked over to the child, picking him up and handing him over to the frozen pair. Namuri accepted the child. She held in a protective position and her eyes started to sparkle once the child had smiled at their presence. He's mine now. Namuri claimed as she ran around the house. Hisashi followed after her, hey, no fair. Give me the child. Aizawa, regretting his decision, followed after them. Don't injure him. Remember, he's Nezu Jr. After the game of chase, Nezu came out of his office and demanded them to hand over the child. They did what he said and gave Izuku to his loving father. Izuku giggled because of all of the chaos and clapped his hands together. Then the four of them all watched some family-friendly shows. It was getting dark and was nearly time for dinner. The three that came over to visit had to return home, since their parents would be worrying about where they would be. When they all left, Nezu started on dinner and Izuku watched him. They ate dinner together and went back to their bedroom. Nezu pulled out a book that he wanted to read to Izuku as a bedtime story. The book he chose was called The Terrors of Humans. Amazingly, Izuku listened to the story and fell asleep without a nightmare, but he was also very interested in the book. Nezu could tell that he was going to have fun with his little mouse now and in the future. Chapter 5, Support. It was Monday morning and Nezu completed his normal routine, but remembered to gather things for Izuku, just in case he needed them. Nezu headed over to UA with Izuku in his paws. He walked through the empty halls of the high school and entered his office. He placed the child on the couch in his office and sat in his seat. Nezu processed to do his paperwork while Izuku studied him from afar. Meanwhile, with the babysitters, they were all on their way to school and met each other at the gates of UA. They came earlier than normal, since someone needed an explanation of Izuku's quirk that shouldn't be mentioned to anyone else. Oboro. It's nice to see you back after a week. Tensei said as he slapped Oboro's back. He squinted in pain. Yeah, it's nice to see you too. Namuri laughed and exclaimed, I can't wait to see Izuku. He's just the cutest. He totally is. Agreed Hisashi. Aizawa sighed. Let's just go already. They all walked into the empty school and made their way to Nezu's office. Once they entered the room, they saw Nezu doing his paperwork and Izuku staring at him. The students waited near the door as they didn't want to disturb, but they had to get the chimera to notice them. Tensei fake coughed, catching the principal's attention. Oh, sorry. I didn't see you there, but you can come forward. Nezu apologized. They nodded and walked forward towards the desk. So, Oboro. I hear that you would also like to look after Izuku. Is that correct? Nezu asked. Oboro nodded. Yes, if I could. Well, that depends on the view you will have of Izuku once you find out his quirk. Aizawa said something similar, but doesn't he need to be 4 years old for him to develop his quirk? Questioned Oboro. Nezu sighed. I will explain once the other teachers come. Like on cue, all the teachers entered the office. Nezu, you called us for something? Asked Lunch Rush. Yes, I have. Nezu said as he walked towards his son. You see, I have chosen to adopt a child. What? Yelled all of the UA staff, with their eyes forward, except Recovery Girl. Meet my little mouse, Izuku. Nezu introduced as he held up the child in his paws. Hound Dog questioned, Nezu, why do you all of a sudden want to adopt a child? Nezu answered, I found this child outside UA on Friday and he was abandoned by his mother. How could his mother do such a thing? Exclaimed Hisashi, since it was his first time hearing this, along with his friends. He wasn't abandoned because she wanted to do it. You see, villains are after the child and he has no other family, since his father died 1 month before he was left here. Why would villains target the child? Oboro asked the question all the staff, except Recovery Girl, had been thinking. He is a unique and special child. He has a IQ that could be higher than mine when he grows up and dash. Nezu was cut off thanks to the UA staff shouting, what? Nezu sighed and repeated, he might have a higher IQ than me when he is older. How is that possible? Power Loader exclaimed. Can I continue? Nezu said in a serious tone. They gulped and nodded, good. Now, as I was saying. The child not only has a high IQ, the villains are after him because of his quirk. He was born with one. That was why I thought a hero should adopt him, but they are too busy with their duties, but there were heroes in UA and they could keep an eye on him and protect him. There were gasps and eyes widened. He was born with one. What is his quirk? It should be pretty powerful if villains are after him, right? Asked Cementos. Do you promise that you won't judge the child once you find out his quirk? Nezu questioned. Power Loader looked confused. Why would we do that to the innocent being? Just promise. Nezu ordered. We promise. Everyone who didn't know his quirk said in unison. Good. Nezu explained, his quirk is really dangerous if fallen in the wrong hands. It's a quirk called Deletion and it can delete or erase a quirk permanently. The only drawback is that he has to touch mutant quirk users to delete the quirk and it takes his energy. With other quirks that are not mutant, he just has to look at the target and then he can erase the quirk. The room was silent. Dead silent, until Oboro spoke up. Well, now we have been warned on what he can do, but I still want to look after him. He's just a child and we heroes can teach him the right from wrong. Wait, doesn't he have high IQ? Well, even better. He would know what to do and I have noticed that he is wearing a bracelet. Is that a quirk-canceling bracelet? Nezu nodded. Great. Now we know that it can't lose control. Anyway, we have Aizawa, and what's so wrong with being a hero without a quirk? Aizawa has to fight quirkless, but that doesn't make him less cool. He has a bright future ahead and could be our greatest ally. We can take care of him and he will save many lives with that quirk. We just need to protect from falling into the wrong hands. So Nezu, my option of him will never change Nezu, and neither should anyone else's. Oboro lectured. At the end of his speech, his friends clapped and so did the other UA staff. Some were moved to tears and others had tears forming in their eyes. Wonderful speech, Oboro. You should quit becoming a hero and become a politician. Namuri teased. Hey. You guys already knew this, didn't you? Oboro exclaimed. Tensei nodded. Yeah, but we didn't know that he was abandoned. We accept Izuku for who he is. Also, Aizawa also made that sort of speech, but it was not as emotional as yours though. Oboro turned bright red, like a tomato once he realized what he just said the moments before, and grabbed Izuku from Nezu and cuddled with him in the corner, out of embarrassment. The group of friends laughed at the tomato in the corner and went over to comfort him, while the teachers talked to Nezu. Nezu, we also accept him and will protect him to the best of our ability when the time is needed. Lunch Rush stated, with every staff agreeing with him. Thank you very much for the support. Nezu thanked. Once Oboro came out of the corner, he walked towards the teachers with his friends and Izuku giggling in his arms. When they reached the teachers, Oboro handed Izuku back to Nezu and Izuku gave his brightest smile. Everyone in the empty UA high school thought of same thing. We will always protect this ball of sunshine no matter the cost. Chapter 6, first word. It had been 5 months since Nezu has taken in Izuku as his own, and now he was 8 months old. Over the months, Izuku started to walk and Nezu filmed the whole thing. Nezu was starting to become a real parent and he dearly loved his little mouse. Izuku also began to try and say proper words. He hasn't said anything yet, but is trying to. Nezu wanted to film Izuku when he said his first word and he knew that it was going to come soon. He was hoping it was Papa or something close to that. Aizawa and the others have been looking after Izuku when things are busy, and surprisingly, they are all up to date for their classes. The only motivation Nemuri, Hizashi, and Oboro needed was Izuku. Sometimes when they had unfinished work and didn't know what to do, they would ask Izuku for the answer. It was funny and Aizawa made sure he filmed the whole thing. Izuku always chose the correct answer, but once the teachers found out that the three were using Izuku like goggle, they told Nezu, and let's just say they felt the wrath of an angry parent. Aizawa and the rest have been looking after Izuku and sometimes they would lose him, but he would always be with Nezu when they found him. It would give them panic attacks and they would search every corner of the room. The whole school now knew that Nezu had a child, but they were kept in the dark about his quirk. They always greeted him when they saw him and he would return a blinding smile. Izuku still had the quirk-canceling bracelet and he has grown taller. Nezu and Izuku have their storytelling books, and once they tried to read at school, but was caught by Recovery Girl reading How to Do Proper Torture. That's when the staff swore to themselves that they wouldn't let Nezu Jr. become a reality, but what they didn't know was that Izuku enjoyed the books his father was reading to him. He found it interesting and was glad when his father read them as his bedtime stories. Luckily, Izuku still has his innocence, well except the Nezu stuff, but he doesn't know any swear words or other things, since Nezu didn't want his little mouse to know about that stuff. On a Wednesday afternoon, Nezu had a meeting with the other staff of UA. Aizawa and his friends were pulled out of class and went tasked with looking after Izuku. Izuku ran over to the door once it opened to reveal Tensei, Oboro, Hizashi, Nemuri and Aizawa. They were caught in surprised. That's going to be the death of me," exclaimed Aizawa. Repeated a confused small broccoli. The whole group glared at Aizawa. He gulped and hoped that Nezu didn't hear that right at that moment. "Shota, you taught him how to swear," Hizashi whispered as he leaned towards Aizawa's face. Oboro and Tensei shook their heads in disappointment. Nemuri smacked Aizawa's head. "Hey, at least he said his first words," Aizawa replied. "Yeah, but Nezu isn't here and didn't film it. Also his first word is fuck, I mean the F word," Oboro countered. "Well then, let's just teach him to just say Papa before Nezu finishes his meeting," Aizawa responded. The group attempted to teach the word Papa to Izuku by repeating the word over and over again, but he didn't say it even once. They were losing hope, and it became even worse when they heard the door beginning to open. Nezu appeared and all the attention went straight to him. The students backed up hoping that Izuku wouldn't reveal their buttes and say Papa instead. Izuku ran over to Nezu yelling, "Papa! Papa!" Nezu froze in his tracks and saw a little green-haired child run over to him saying Papa. Tears started to form in his eyes. He hugged back to the child who just called him Papa for the first time. They had a wholesome moment, while the group of students, in the back, were relieved that Izuku ended up saying Papa as his first word in front of his father. They continued to watch the moment, but Nemuri and Hizashi were filming. "I'm so glad that I put up cameras everywhere in the school. Now I have it on film, just like I wanted," Nezu said. Nemuri and Hizashi dropped their phones. The others had cold sweat, but Aizawa had it the worst. They all escaped the room in a silent manner, while Nezu and Izuku continued their moment. Once it was done, Nezu insisted to watch the video and they both sat at the desk. They replayed the video to when Aizawa and others entered the room. When Nezu heard his little mouse say, F, he was extremely angry, and what didn't help was Izuku's comment, F. Nezu tried to continue his anger, by saying, "Little mouse, that's a no word. Don't ever say that, okay?" Izuku nodded his head with a confused face and a few minutes later, fell asleep in the warm embrace. Once Nezu checked that his little mouse was sleeping, he placed him on the couch and headed towards Class 1A. The door slammed open to reveal all of Class 1A. Aizawa. Care you explain this? Nezu asked as he played Izuku saying F for the first time after Aizawa entered the office, with a twisted smile. Aizawa gulped and slid down his seat. I can explain. I was surprised that he ran up to us and then I kinda swore in front of him. Sure, that's what happened, but that doesn't mean I will let you off the hook. Nezu answered. The whole class just watched as Aizawa was dragged from his seat to the outside of the class. Some were raging over the fact that Aizawa taught Izuku how to swear, but others, like Aizawa's friends, prayed for Aizawa. Let him rest in peace. They thought with their hands together. Outside of the classroom, Aizawa was getting beaten up by the angry chimera parent, and from inside of the classroom, they could hear Aizawa screaming for help and the moment of contact with force, which Nezu had punched Aizawa many times. The students were terrified and made a note for themselves. Never active Nezu's angry parent mode. Once Aizawa returned to the class, Nezu had already left, not wanting his little mouse alone in his office, but Aizawa was covered in bruises. The students gasped at the sight. They didn't know that Nezu would cause so much damage to someone, since he was small and all, but they were clearly wrong. The teacher looked concerned and ordered, Aizawa, go visit Recovery Girl and tell her what happened. Aizawa nodded and followed his teacher's instructions. He limped over to the infirmary and knocked on the door. Once he heard a response, he entered. Recovery Girl faced him, asked, "What happened to you, dear?" Nezu happened. He replied. Recovery Girl sighed. But what made Nezu cause this much damage on you? I kinda taught Izuku how to say F. Recovery Girl's facial expression darkened. You taught him to swear? Yes. Aizawa said. What the hell are you thinking? Are you trying to taint the innocent being? He is still being taught Nezu. Don't just take all the innocence from him. Recovery Girl yelled. Aizawa stuttered, yes ma'am, it won't happen again. It better not. Recovery Girl said, but then she sighed and the entire mood changed. She kissed Aizawa on his forehead and told him he head back to class. On the way there, Aizawa thought to himself. I don't think we should ever swear in front of Izuku again, well maybe when he's older, but still. Also not to self. Never get Nezu and Recovery Girl into angry parent mode. Chapter 7, released. Izuku is 1 year old and his babysitters were now in the class 2A. Izuku started to completely say full sentences and has been conversing with his father. They talked about analysis and the improvements UA had to make. To others it would be weird for the principal of a high school to ask feedback to a 1 year old, but all the staff in UA knew what Izuku could do and had no complaints. Izuku could stand on equal ground as Nezu when it came to intelligence, and he gave really good feedback for the students that were about their quirk. He seemed really interested in quirks and people found him mumble about the possible ways that the user of the quirk could use the quirk properly. Everyone thought the mumbling was scary at times, but that helped the school to flourish. When Izuku and Hisashi were together, they would put some music on and sing along. Sometimes they even danced. Once Izuku filmed him while he was doing a particular dance that he called, the Ritual of Waking Hobo. Hisashi hopped around the room with loud screams coming out of his mouth. Izuku laughed at the sight of Hisashi when he told him that the dance was the most annoying way to wake up Aizawa. Once Nezu saw the film, when he saw Aizawa sleeping on his job, he ordered Hisashi to do the ritual, which he gladly agreed to. Everyone in the room laughed as Hisashi did his ritual and the look of annoyance on Aizawa's face. When Namuri was looking after Izuku, she was never alone. She was normally with Oboro because the others didn't want Namuri to ruin the boy's innocence, but he never knew what that meant. Oboro and Namuri would always play games with him and they would always smile in front of him. Tensei would always know how to look after Izuku and was the most calm out of everyone in the group. Most of the time he treated Izuku like a child, but there were times where he would treat him as someone his age or older. They would work on problems together and would talk about fairness and heroes. When Izuku was alone with Aizawa, he would smile and that would warm the hobo's heart, but at times he would follow his father's advice and mess with him a bit. Once he disappeared without a word to Aizawa, but he had just hid in a closet. It scared the hell of Aizawa and his facial expression was priceless. He would be ghostly pale with his eyes frantically looked for the bean. Izuku recorded the whole thing for his father and it would be an understatement if Izuku said that Nezu was pleased. Nezu replayed the video dozens of times and would laugh at Aizawa's expression each time. Izuku loved seeing the people around him smiling and happy, especially his father. Nezu had adopted him and he knew that. They didn't look alike and with the high IQ of Izuku, it didn't take that much to figure out that Nezu and himself were not related. Even if that was the case, he was very grateful that he did, but the one thing he didn't know was that he had a quirk and that villains were after him. When he was outside of his home or UA, he was never left alone, but he only thought it was because he was still 1 year old. He loved the smiles he saw, but he also caught a glimpse of the hidden part of society where people were suffering in need, helplessness, and more. He saw people bullying others because of their quirk and thought about how horrible it was. Izuku wanted to be a hero to save those in need and suffering, so he was aiming to become a hero. He would use his quirk to help people in need, or even better, if he had a weak or was quirkless in general, he would become a role model for those in the shadows. If he were to stand up to all the challenges the weak and quirkless faced and not let other people's words drag him down, then others could do the same. Izuku wanted to go outside every day after what he saw. Nezu was happy that he was so energetic about going out, by going out was dangerous for him, especially since they didn't know which villains are after him. One day Oboro and Aizawa had to go grocery shopping and Izuku wanted to join them. Oboro and Aizawa were in Nezu's office with Izuku so he could get permission. Papa. Papa. Can I go with Uncle Aizawa and Oboro to go shopping? He asked. Nezu hesitantly looked up towards Aizawa and Oboro, since they knew what he was worried about. Nezu had grown attached to the kid and didn't want anything to happen to his protege and son. He loved his little mouse with all his heart and never wanted to let him go, but with the serious nods of his 2 students, he knew that they would protect the boy with any cost. He sighed. Fine, but Izuku, he left off. Yes, Papa. Asked the tiled head Izuku. Please be careful and always stay by Aizawa and Oboro's side, got it? Nezu questioned in a serious tone. Izuku's eyes glistened. Yes, I understand Papa. Izuku hugged Nezu goodbye along with a little wave. The group of 3 left the office and Nezu had a bad feeling, but ignored it, since he knew that Izuku was safe with the 2 teenagers. After buying the groceries, Izuku insisted to buy a long stick of bread. Aizawa and Oboro questioned why he wanted a long stick of bread, but he said he wanted to keep it a secret. Oboro, being the nice person he was, bought Izuku the long stick of bread. Izuku thanked Oboro and was about to rush out the store, but remembered the promise he made to his father. So, he grabbed Oboro and ran to an alleyway. Aizawa was late to follow them but eventually caught up to the 2. What are you doing, Izuku? He asked but stopped at the sight of the homeless beaten up in the alleyway. Izuku let go of Oboro's hand, walked over to the people with the long stick in his hands. There were about 5 people in the alleyway in rags and were all huddled together. There was one older woman who looked like she was in her 30s and the rest were 2 girls and 2 boys, which looked the age in between 6. They flinched as Izuku moved closer over to them. Hello. I'm Izuku, he introduced himself. And the people behind me are Aizawa and Oboro. The 5 lessened their guards and let Izuku walk over to them. I saw that you didn't have any food and I felt sad, so I want you to have this bread. Izuku said. Everyone in the alleyway widened their eyes. The 2 caretakers thought, so that's why he wanted that long bread stick. How thoughtful. They warmly smiled at the end of their thoughts and were happy that the child had a bright heart. Can we really have the bread? whispered a boy. Yes, please take it. Izuku handed the bread into the older woman's hand. As Izuku was walking away to the exit of the alleyway, to where Aizawa and Oboro were, the family of 5 bowed their heads and cried, "Thank you, thank you. May the Lord and his servants bless you, our young hero." Izuku warmly smiled back towards them and they simply smiled back. After leaving the alleyway, they headed towards UA and chatted along the way. "Izuku, that was very kind," Oboro stated. Izuku shook his head. "No, it was Uncle Oboro who bought the bread and I'm sorry for running off Uncle Aizawa." "It's okay, problem child, just tell us next time, okay?" Aizawa said. "Yes," Izuku answered. They continued to walk in peace, until they heard screams. Aizawa and Oboro turned towards the direction from the scream came from. "Shoto, stay here with Izuku while I go check it out," ordered Oboro. Aizawa nodded and picked up Izuku into his arms. Oboro ran out into the scene at a fast speed. After 10 minutes, Aizawa was uncertain of what was happening, but since Oboro hadn't returned yet, he was worried. He decided to go into the direction Oboro went to. He reached a mall and saw that the heroes were down for the count. He continued to look for Oboro and when he found him, he saw that he was bleeding right in front of the villain. Aizawa dropped Izuku, but Izuku was able to have a safe landing on his feet. Izuku pushed through the crowd trying to get to his cloud caretaker, but something slipped off his wrist. He ignored the feeling since someone precious was injured right in front of him. Aizawa was frozen and couldn't do anything with a paled expression on his face. Once Izuku made it to the front, he could clearly see the villain. The villain's name was Crusher. His quirk was pressure. It allowed him to apply pressure to a target's body, pushing them towards the ground. It could kill them or at the very least injure them seriously. In that moment, Izuku watched as Oboro was being crushed by pressure while the villain was laughing at him. Izuku, crying because he didn't want Oboro to be killed, thought about the villain's quirk and how it was hurting his friend. Wishing that the quirk would go away, he subconsciously used his quirk. "Stop!" he yelled on top of his lungs while crying. Everyone was looking at the boy who was crying waterfalls of tears and was glowing. After the quirk was used for the first time, he glowed a bright green around his body and his eyes were glowing the brightest emerald, which made them look like actual jewels sparking in the sunlight. People backed away from the glowing child and the attention went towards him. The quirk that was crushing many pro-heroes and Oboro disappeared and they got up. Oboro, realizing that Izuku had used his quirk against the villain, quickly told the heroes to secure Crusher and headed towards Izuku. Hey. You can stop now," he whispered quickly. "See. I'm okay. Everything's okay, so stop. Can you do that for me?" Aizawa ran up towards the two and tried to comfort Izuku along with Oboro. It didn't work. Izuku was still crying rivers of tears and his glow only got brighter. Not knowing what to do, he panicked and cried, "I don't know how to stop. Please tell me how to stop." The babysitters nodded at each other and Aizawa's hair started to float. His eyes turned red as he stared at Izuku. The glowing subsided and Izuku fell forwards. Oboro caught him and worried, but it seemed that he was asleep. They sighed and carried Izuku back to UA, where they had to report to Nezu about the incident and what happened. While heading back to UA, the police captured Crusher and he didn't even try to escape. The only thing he did was mumble. He mumbled, "It's gone. It's really gone. My quirk." The police was confused about what he meant, but they didn't care. While they headed back to Nezu's office, Oboro smiled as he whispered, "Thank you Izuku, you're my savior. Without you and your quirk, I would have been killed with the other heroes." Aizawa overheard the whisper and apologized with his head down, "I'm sorry Oboro. Even though you were in danger, I was frozen in my spot. I should have acted." "It's okay Shoto." He smiled. "If I were in your shoes, I would have done the same. But now that you have experienced it, you can change and become a better hero. A hero just like Izuku here. Aizawa grinned and replied, "No, I will surpass him." "Let's see about that," responded Oboro. Once they were in Nezu's office, they saw the whole staff and the other babysitters there. It was the perfect time to report the incident. Aizawa explained the whole incident in detail, and by the end of the report, there was tension in the room. "We have to keep a closer eye on him now," declared Recovery Girl. Power Loader nodded. After activating his quirk in public, some people might find out what his quirk is, since he deleted Crusher's quirk. "Even if we have to keep a closer eye on him, we will all protect him, Nezu, so don't worry, but I think it's best that he doesn't go out," Tensei suggested. Nezu agreed, and so did everyone else. They would keep a closer eye on his little mouse and not let him outside for a while. They all looked towards the small sleeping child, who was sleeping peacefully on the couch with a new quirk-canceling bracelet on his wrist. "It's for the protection of Izuku," they thought. Chapter 8, First Friend. It has been 2 years since Izuku had left UA or his house, and now his babysitters have grown closer to him than before, and they have been visiting Izuku even if there was no need for them to look after him. They all would have lunch and dinner over at Nezu's house over the weekends, but most of the time, Tensei couldn't make it, since he had other things to look after. They all were like a small family. Even the staff of UA was a part of the family, but he couldn't but feel a little lonely. Since he didn't want anyone to worry, he continued to smile and try to act normally, and no one suspected a thing. Izuku knew what his quirk could do and how to use it, but it terrified him. What would happen if I accidentally delete my family's quirk? Will they abandon me? Will they hurt me? Will they be sad and never talk to me again? He kept asking himself. When Izuku were playing with Narumi, Hizashi and Oboro, the other two in the group strolled up to Nezu. At the moment Nezu was filing documents and getting ready for the weekends. "Nezu, we need to talk," Aizawa demanded. Nezu faced towards the two. "All right," he answered as they all left the office where the child was playing. "It has been 2 years since you let him go out, and he hasn't have any friends his age, so I was thinking, isn't time for him to go out?" asked Tensei. Nezu sighed, knowing this was coming. "I know, but I still don't want him to go outside. I know that he needs friends his age, but it's still dangerous for him." Aizawa sighed. "We understand that you are worried, but rate this rate, Izuku will get lonely. Even if he's older, it will still be dangerous." Nezu lowered his head. The two teens sighed and nodded towards each other. "Since you still want Izuku to stay behind walls and want him to have friends, why not have my younger brother as his pirate friend? I mean, they should be old enough," Tensei suggested. Nezu looked up, and agreed. For him that was the best option. It would get Izuku a friend his age and he would still be inside. The three of them set up a time and place for the children to meet. It was decided for them to meet at Nezu's house on the next day. It was Saturday and Izuku was reading one of Nezu's book, while his father was waiting for the door to make a noise. The doorbell rang and Nezu rushed towards the door. Izuku only watched Nezu with a curious expression on his face. Once the chimera opened the door, it revealed his babysitters and a child with dark navy blue hair. He wore rectangle glasses and hid behind Tensei's leg. Izuku closed his book and slowly walked over to the door. "Welcome," Nezu greeted, "Please come in." Everyone at the door came into the house, and so did the kid that tagged along. They made their way to the living room and saw a closed book, but no Izuku. Nezu looked side to side and found Izuku staring at the child who came along. He stared in curiosity and tilted his head slightly to the left. "Izuku, come here," Nezu said. Izuku walked to him and stood in front. "Izuku, this is Tenya. He's Tensei's younger brother and he is the same age as you. I hope you can become friends with him, so why not play around while I talk to the others?" Nezu asked. Izuku's emerald eyes sparkled and gleamed, "Yes. Of course. He rushed towards the child, who was Tenya Iida, and introduced himself. Hello. My name is Izuku. It's nice to meet you. Iida stopped hiding and bowed. It's nice to meet you, Izuku. I am Tenya Iida. Once Iida stood up properly, Izuku grabbed both of his hands and clasped them together. Can we be friends? Exclaimed Izuku. Iida froze and didn't know what to say. Other kids in his daycare thought he was weird, since he did robotic hand movements, so he never had a friend. Unsure, Iida asked, Are you sure? I mean, I do weird hand movements. Aren't I weird? Izuku, knowing that Iida was a good kid, replied, Of course we can be friends. You're not weird. If everyone is the same, it would be boring. So if you are different, you are you. Nothing should change. Iida was shocked. All he thought was that he needed to fit in with the others, but the kid in front of him told him to be himself. It meant a lot. It meant that he would accept him for who he was and didn't care if he was strange. He smiled and answered the question that Izuku asked him before. Okay, then. Let's be friends. Izuku looked like he was going to explode from happiness. Yay! I made my first friend. He shouted. Iida widened his eyes once more. He thought that someone like Izuku would have many friends, but he was the first one he made. Everyone else in the room clapped, happy that Izuku made a new friend, as well as Iida. Okay, now that you have a new friend, why don't you play with him in your room? Nezu asked politely. Izuku smiled brightly and yelled, Okay. He grabbed Iida's wrist and rushed upstairs to Tohi's room. Iida was making a shocked and worried face, since he was never dragged like he was. The teenagers laughed at the scene. Tensei was especially happy. He never saw his brother show that much emotion, since he started to go to his daycare. For him, it was nice to know that his brother found a good and wonderful friend. The children went into a bright white room filled with little, cute and white pictures of mice on the walls. There were a lot of books and notebooks in the room. Iida scanned the room he was in and was amazed that Izuku liked to read. Izuku pulled him towards the bed, which was also white, but there was a bit of green and red. So, since we're friends, we should get to know each other better, said Izuku as he hopped onto the bed. Iida followed his actions and landed on the soft bed. I guess you're right. So, what should we talk about? Izuku closed his eyes and crossed his arms. Oh, I know. He exclaimed as he opened his eyes. What do you like and why? I like my family, books and many other things. Iida immediately answered with his eyes sparkling. I like my brother because he's always caring for me and treats everyone equally. He's my role model. Izuku nodded. Uncle Tensei knows his stuff and is better than others. He is really kind and caring, but on the other hand you have Uncle Hisashi, who is a jokester and makes people laugh. Then there's Uncle Aizawa that only wants sleep and Auntie Namiri, who is funny with Uncle Oboro. Izuku commented, but then asked, wait, if Uncle Tensei is your role model, do you want to be a hero? Iida nodded. I come from the family of Iida. We are a family of heroes. I want to follow my brother's footsteps and help him when I get older. Iida said with a determined robotic chop. Izuku looked at his new friend. That must be nice. Iida turned towards Izuku and questioned, don't you want to be a hero? I do, but I want to help Papa and I can't go outside. Izuku answered. Iida looked concerned. Why can't you go outside? I don't know, but I know that Papa and the others must have a reason for their actions. Izuku replied. Is that why you were so happy that you had a first friend? Yeah, but before, why did you ask if I was sure that I wanted to be your friend? Well, you see I don't have any other friends but you, so you're my first friend. Other people don't want to be my friend because I'm weird. Don't say that. You're unique and that makes you, you. If people don't accept you, then come to me and we will prove them that you're not weird. Then we can become great heroes. Izuku said as he stood up on the bed. Iida looked up and thanked his brother that he brought him along. At first when his brother said that he would make a new friend, he didn't want to go, but he was dragged there. He was now happy that he finally got a friend and that friend was willing to help him. After hours, they had lunch and dinner, but then Iida and everyone else had to go. Izuku hugged his new friend goodbye and had a little chat while Nezu was talking to the teenagers. "Ten-chan, please come over again," Izuku said with a sad expression. "Of course," Iida answered, but then realized what Izuku called him. "Wait, Ten-chan." Izuku responded, "It's a nickname. You don't like it?" "No, I think it's nice, but since I have a nickname, what's yours?" he asked. "Oh, you can call me Izuku, Zuzu, Zuku or Aizu. You can pick." Iida thought, "No, I think I will continue to call you Izuku." "Okay, if that's what you want," Izuku said. They waved each other goodbye and Nezu's door closed behind them. Izuku and Nezu started to get ready for bed. Meanwhile with the others, they were walking home and Tensei asked, "Tenya, how was your day?" "It was great brother, can we go there again?" Iida asked. The others giggled, happy that the stiff Tenya Iida wanted to hang out with his friend. "Of course, we can go there every weekend, but we have to tell our parents, okay?" "Of course brother. Also thank you for bringing me today. If you didn't, I would have never made my first friend." "No problem Tenya," Tensei replied with a warm smile. On the rest of the way home, Tenya thought, "I will protect my first friend in the smile. I hope that we will continue to be good friends." Chapter 9, Outing. Since making a new friend, Iida and the others came to visit Izuku every Sunday, so the children could play with each other. The teenagers just talked to Nezu, or even got tutored by him. They were falling behind and needed help with their studies. Izuku and Iida would talk and play, but mostly talk about how people their age do. Iida even explained what was happening outside that Izuku hasn't seen in 2 years and his life story. Izuku was happy to hear all the stories Iida told him about, but wished he could go out as well. Soon 1 year passed and they both were Iida was getting his quirk soon and Izuku was wondering what to tell Iida about his quirk. Iida has been with Izuku for the past year and never saw Izuku leave UA or his house, so as a way to thank him for being a wonderful friend, he was going to free him. On one Sunday, Iida came over with his brother and the other caretakers for a play date, or how the teenagers call it, their tutor session. Everything was going the same. Izuku dragged Iida to his bedroom and they closed the door, but once it was closed Iida suggested something Izuku never thought of. "Izuku, we should sneak out," he suggested. Izuku was surprised. Iida always wanted to follow the rules, yet he was suggesting something that could make the others mad. "Why?" asked Izuku. Iida sighed. "You said you haven't been outside since you were 1, so why not go outside now after 3 years? But, what if we make the others angry, or even worse, sad?" complained Izuku. "We can explain it to them later and I would take all the blame if they find out," Iida said. "No. Then Ten-chan is in trouble. I don't want that." Iida sighed again, "But don't you want to go outside?" Izuku was silent and then made up his mind. "I will go, but we have to get back before the others realize." Iida smiled and they quietly walked downstairs. They checked that they were all busy and saw that Nezu was sipping tea while the rest were studying. Iida walked towards the window and opened it. Once it was opened, he hopped out with Izuku following him. When they were out, Izuku looked around and saw people in the far distance. He faced Iida with gleaming eyes. Iida smiled and they ran around with Iida as the tour guide. Then they reached a forest. "Hey Ten-chan, can we go in there?" asked Izuku. "Sure, but watch your step, okay?" Iida recommended. Izuku nodded and walked inside with Iida. They keep wandering around and Izuku took all of his surroundings. They were chatting about things, but they stopped when they heard quiet cries. Izuku immediately rushed towards the sound and Iida followed him. They kept running until they saw a child crouched down on the floor with his hands around his legs and head in between them. The boy had bandages around his left eye and he had two different hair colors. They were split in half, with the white hair on the right and the red on the left. Iida was cautious and didn't approach the kid, but Izuku was worried. It was plastered all over his face and he slowly walked towards the boy. Iida tried to grab his arm, but couldn't. "Hey, are you okay?" asked Izuku. The boy looked up and saw Izuku with the sunshine right behind him. It made Izuku shine brighter and the child thought it looked cool. He answered, "No, I'm not okay. My father poured boiling water on my face because I didn't use my quirk better in the training." Izuku scrunched his brows together. "That's not nice. Does your father do that normally?" The boy nodded. "He hits me and my siblings, even my mother." Once realizing what he said, he covered his mouth. He wasn't supposed to tell a stranger that, but he felt safe with the person in front of him. He felt like he could tell him everything, even the things he shouldn't. Iida watched from afar with his worrying for Izuku gone, but the concern for the new kid they have just met, grew. A parent shouldn't hit a child. He could tell that Izuku was not happy after hearing the response the dual-hair-colored boy said, but he knew that Izuku would save him somehow. "That's even more not nice. Why don't you come with me and we will save your family?" asked Izuku. The kid was shocked. A stranger that he just met today wanted to help him, but should he really trust him? He thought that he seemed to be a nice person and he could trust him. The boy nodded and got off from the ground. He took Izuku's hand and introduced himself. "I'm Shoto Todoroki, thank you for helping me," he said. Iida walked over and Todoroki faced him. Iida bowed to him and placed his hand in front. He replied, "Nice to meet you Todoroki, I am Tenya Iida." Todoroki shook his hand and nodded. They both faced Izuku as he introduced himself. "Hi Sho-chan, I'm Izuku. You can call me Izuku, Zuzu, Zuku, or Izu," he said with a bright smile. Todoroki squinted and leaned towards Iida. He asked, "What is Sho-chan? And is this normal?" Iida, who was also squinting answered, "Yes, this is normal and you're Sho-chan. He calls me Ten-chan, so I'm guessing he thinks of you as a friend." Todoroki smiled slightly knowing that he made his first friend. They all walked to Nezu's house and they got to know each other on the way. Todoroki felt safe with telling Iida and Izuku his life story and his feelings. Iida was concerned and was mad towards the number 2 hero, Endeavor, but he knew that he couldn't help. He looked over to the green-haired boy, who was too quiet. Izuku was mad and Iida could feel bloodlust from the innocent being, but he stayed silent as he continued to listen to Todoroki's story. Once they reached Nezu's house, they could hear the chaos inside of the house. Iida and Izuku's sweat dropped because they forgot that they snuck out of the house. Todoroki was confused but followed Iida and Izuku through an open window of the house, but when they were inside of the house, there was a white chimera glaring at them. The green and blue-haired children gulped as Nezu started to open his mouth. "Where have you been?" he asked in a cold tone without his normal smile. Iida was frozen and remembered that he said he would have took the blame, but before he could say anything, Izuku spoke up. "I'm sorry Papa, I suggested to Iida that we sneak out of the house, since I haven't left the house in 3 years. Izuku answered. Todoroki's eyes widened. The child that told him to follow him hadn't been out of the house for 3 years. It made him wonder. Why was he not allowed to go out? Nezu sighed. He knew that Izuku missed going outside, but he didn't think that he would actually sneak out. It's fine, but you're not going outside. Don't do that again. Nezu demanded. Iida and Todoroki were shocked. Does that mean the Izuku couldn't leave the house anymore? They asked themselves. Sir, that's not fair. I was the one that convinced him to sneak. Iida started to say, but was cut off by Izuku. I understand, but Papa, I know that I'm in no to ask, but please can we get rid of Endeavor? Izuku asked. Nezu was surprised. Izuku had snuck out, but he wanted to get rid of Endeavor. Nezu asked, may I know why? Izuku pushed Todoroki to the front and Nezu immediately recognized who it was. Izuku, why is Endeavor's youngest son here? Papa, Endeavor has committed abuse, family violence and has hurt many citizens while fighting villains. I believe that he is no longer needed in society. Izuku said with dead eyes. Nezu was shocked. He knew about the last part, but didn't know about the first two. He looked back to Todoroki and saw injuries and the bandages. He sighed and asked Todoroki about his past. They all moved to Nezu's study and the teenagers joined in too. They all heard all of what Endeavor had done to his family and they were discussed with the so-called number 2 hero. Wow, you must have had a lot to endure, little one. Oboro said as he patted Todoroki's head. Hisashi nodded. To think the number 2 hero would do that. Aizawa grunted, well, he is always trying to get into the number 1 hero's place and he's also a flaming trash can. He should just disappear. At the comment, Todoroki's eyes lit up. He nodded at a fast rate. The teenager's sweat dropped. Endeavor really mistreated his kids for one of them to want him dead. It was getting dark and the group had a lot of evidence on Endeavor, thanks to the expert Izuku. They were going to get the report to the court on the next day. Once Todoroki heard the news, he was happy and smiled. He was glad that he made friends and they were helping him to get out of the household that he hated so much. Todoroki stayed over at Nezu's house and so did Iida, since Todoroki didn't want to go home and Iida didn't want to be left out. They all slept in Izuku's room, but before they were asleep, they talked about Todoroki's quirk, since, they thought, he was the only one with a quirk. Izuku loved to hear about quirks and he even took notes on Todoroki's quirk. He also mumbled possibilities of how to use it as he jotted them down in his notes. Time to time, Todoroki would ask, is this normal, to Iida, but all he got as a response was a nod. Nezu was happy that Izuku was helping someone and saving them, but was worried about Izuku going out in public. He also was worried about what should he tell them about Izuku's quirk. Would they leave him once they find out? Will they be the same? Will Izuku be treated as a monster? He had many questions, but he decided to leave them be and focus on saving Todoroki's siblings and mother from the monster, Endeavor. The trial would be on the next day and it was his mission for it to succeed. Chapter 10, Trial. It was time for the trial and Nezu was in his mini-suit and had many documents in his paws. Babysitting Izuku was Aizawa and Tensei. The 3 children were going to play while the trial was taking place. Before Nezu went out to go to the trial, he kissed Izuku on the forehead. Good luck, Papa. Destroy him with evidence and shame. Izuku cheered. Nezu grinned manically and replied, of course. They both laughed manically, while Aizawa, Tensei, Iida and Todoroki sweat dropped at the sight. The teenagers thought, we didn't stop Nezu Jr. from appearing. The 2 children thought, Nezu left the house and headed towards the court where Endeavor was already there. Rei, Endeavor's wife, was there with her eldest son, Tuya. They had a call from Nezu late last night telling them that Endeavor, also known as Enji Todoroki, was going to have a trial for abuse, family violence and many other things. It made the family members happy, but they were worried for the youngest son, since he wasn't home. Nezu explained what happened earlier in the day and Rei was happy that her son made friends. She agreed that she would participate with the trial of the number 2 hero. Tuya was smiling at the start of the trial and was hoping that everything would turn against his father and go into the favor of Nezu. Once everyone was there, the whole trial began. Meanwhile, the children were playing with each other in the living room. The caretakers got an order from Nezu. It was, don't let them out of your sight. Nezu was afraid that they would have escaped or snuck out of the house, if they didn't keep an eye on them. They were chatting about their favorite heroes and their quirk. Todoroki's favorite pro-hero was All Might, Iida's was his brother, who was becoming a pro-hero, and Izuku's favorite was his very own father, Nezu. "So why do you like All Might, Sho-chan?" asked Izuku. "Well, because he is the opposite of my father," Todoroki answered. The two teenagers who overheard the conversation, sweat dropped. This kid really hates his father, they thought. "Okay, Ten-chan, why do you like Uncle Tensei as a hero?" Iida pushed up his glasses. "You see, my brother truly aims to become the best pro-hero he can be, and I think that is admirable. He wants to save people in need, and he is my overall role model. Now he is the hero ingenium." Izuku and Todoroki clapped their hands together. Tensei was crying happy tears as he heard Iida say wonderful things about him. Aizawa just watched Tensei as he was now grabbing tissues to stop the crying. Todoroki stopped clapping and asked Izuku, "So why choose your father, Aizu?" "I mean, I don't see him rescuing people like the other heroes on TV." Izuku smiled and replied, "Papa is my favorite because he started UA where many other people try and become heroes to save others. His school brings hope to the future heroes, and he sets them on the right path to become better heroes. But my papa also saves people like you, Sho-chan." Iida and Todoroki agreed to the first statement, but didn't understand the second, so Izuku explained. "Papa gathers information and evidence on the wrongdoings of people and help the victims. Just like how he is at court trying to save your family, Sho-chan." Now understanding, they also agreed that Nezu was a great hero. They continued to play and talk, while the teens also played along. It was getting late and Nezu still didn't return to the house. It worried Izuku, but since it was his house, he couldn't let his guests worried as well. Izuku continued to smile and no one suspected a thing. Once it was getting close to midnight, the teenagers tried to convince the children to go to sleep, but they refused. They wanted to stay up until Nezu walked through the door and told them what was going to happen. Then, all of a sudden, there was click at the door and it swag open. Standing there was Nezu, a woman with white hair and what seemed to be her children. Todoroki, immediately knowing who they were, dashed towards them with tears. "Mother! Tuya! Natsuo! Fuyumi!" he shouted. They all did a group hug and Izuku concluded that the unfamiliar faces were his family. "Shoto, so this was where you were?" replied Natsuo. Todoroki nodded. "I was crying in the forest yesterday because he hurt mother again, but then Aizu and Iida found me. They brought me over here and I explained to Nezu about our situation. He decided to help us and did the trial," he explained. "Thank you, Shoto. Thanks to you we got help and that BSTRD has a life sentence to prison. Thank Tuya." Todoroki smiled and so did the others. Everyone who wasn't a part of the Todoroki family, stood in the background and watched in silence. It was getting late and they all had school the next day, so the Iidas decided to head out first with Aizawa. Iida waved goodbye to Izuku, since Todoroki and his family were talking about the trial. "Izuku, make sure that you look after Todoroki and that you get a proper night's rest," Iida demanded. Izuku giggled, "Of course, Ten-chan." With that the group of 3 left and the rest were all in the living room. Rei had Todoroki eating in her lap, while the rest of her kids surrounded her. For the people who were not there at the trial, such as Natsuo, Fuyumi, Shoto, Todoroki and Izuku, I will explain what happened," Nezu stated. They nodded and Nezu continued, "The trial started at 10 a.m. and Endeavor was in Quirk canceling cuffs. The police had to drag him there, since he refused to go and was furious to see his wife and eldest child there. From there I decided it would be best to talk about the civilians and buildings that Endeavor had caused damage to and hurt. The judge looked at the evidence and agreed, but that only took away his hero license, meaning he was no longer a hero." Natsuo whispered, "But since it was quiet everyone could hear. That BSTRD shouldn't be a hero in the first place." Nezu fake coughed and explained, "It would also mean that he would only have a year or 2 in prison, but since that was not the real matter at hand, I moved on to the abuse and family violence. Thanks to Tuya and Rei being there, they were the evidence against the claim. They are covered in injured and bandages. Also neighbors were helpful and provided recordings of your screams, and that gave enough evidence of the case. After that, he was sent to lifetime in jail, because of the civilians he killed in fighting villains recklessly and family violence. So now, the Todoroki family are free from the grasp of the monster Endeavor. Izuku clapped and others followed his example. The Todoroki children were smiling brightly and seemed to be happy. Since they were happy, Izuku was happy and smiled the brightest smile he had shown them. They all squinted, and Nezu, who knew it was coming, closed his eyes before it happened. After the explanation, Rei decided that it was getting late and she and her family should be heading home. Nezu suggested to move houses, since the house they were living in might bring bad memories, but Rei declined the offer that Nezu gave her, saying, "I will change those bad memories into happy ones." Nezu was surprised, but happy that she wanted to move on. With that, the Todorokis left the house and headed to their home. While heading home, Todoroki remembered the smile Izuku made and thought, "It's all thanks to Izu. If he didn't invite me to follow him, and if I didn't meet him at all, we wouldn't have been free. I like Izu and he is my hero. I like him better than All Might, and I want to protect him and his smile from any danger. I want to be by his side forever and make him mine." After realizing what he was thinking, he snapped out of it by slapping his cheeks with both hands, catching the attention of his family members. He didn't notice and thought to himself, "What am I thinking? I'm just his friend. I don't like him in that way." Todoroki started to blush a bright red, and the whole family, like reading his thoughts, grinned. Rei thought and smiled softly, "My son's gay and I think he likes Izuku. At least Enji is not here. I will support him with everything I got." While the three siblings thought and nodded to each other, "Our baby brother's got a crush on the Izuku kid and we have to make sure that it becomes a reality." When the family reached their house, Todoroki questioned himself, "I don't like him that way, right?" Chapter 11, Secret. It has been 3 years since the Endeavor was put in jail and Izuku still didn't leave the house, other than going to UA. He was now 7 with the rest of his friends. Todoroki and Iida would visit Izuku every weekend, and it was fun that spent time together. The caretakers would watch over them, but not as often, since they were now real pro-heroes, but some of them chose to become teachers at UA as well. All of them chose to become teachers, but Tensei, since he helped his parents in hero work, in Oboro, since he wanted to help people in need all the time. Todoroki and Iida go to the same school, and Tuya became a first student at UA, while Izuku went to UA and helped the teachers out. Once Izuku had to help Aizawa carry stacks of books to his classroom, and his students thought he was Aizawa's child, except Tuya. Izuku had to explain the whole Nezu's child thing to the students, and they were completely frozen. They wondered, how did the sadistic Nezu raise such a cinnamon roll? Then from Aizawa's class, the other classes got to know about Izuku's existence, but of course the seniors already knew. Once in a while the teachers would ask Izuku for help if needed, and Izuku would always reply with a yes. He normally helped Aizawa the most. At one time he was too tired and Izuku came into his classroom. He felt sorry for Aizawa and told him to sleep. Once the teacher was asleep, Izuku faced towards the class. Since he didn't want the heroes of the future to be wise and intelligent, he taught the class himself. The class was frozen. They could finally see what he and Nezu had in common. It was that they were both really smart. The class were spacing out, but Tuya already knew that Izuku was smart, because at times he and his siblings were tutored by him. He took down notes about the lesson. When the students started to listen to the lesson, it was really easy for them to understand, and some hoped that he would become their teacher, instead of the sleeping hobo. The lesson ended, but the students totally forgot about taking notes. They started to panic, but they heard a sound of a book closing. They faced Tuya, who was sitting at the very back and was bowing to Izuku for the understandable lesson. They had their eyes sparkling. The whole class rushed to Tuya and tried to grab his notes, so they could copy them, but Tuya dodged all the attempts. Then they all begged Tuya to write the notes on the board, and he agreed. Izuku laughed at the class as he watched, but walked out of the class shortly after. After a year of getting to know Izuku and the others, Todoroki's family talked to Todoroki about his little crush and they told him that they supported him no matter what. But they told him that Izuku had to return his feelings. Todoroki was glad that his family supported him, and with the comments of, "We'll help you with your love Shoto," and, "We'll make him madly in love with you," from his siblings, he knew that he had to try his best. Todoroki tried to get closer to Izuku, but the little bean hasn't noticed his feelings. Todoroki was determined and his support was, "He still doesn't have a crush yet, I still have a chance." After a while, Iida started to notice Todoroki's feelings. When it was their school lunch break, Iida made sure that no one was around and asked, "Todoroki, you like Izuku, don't you?" The question made Todoroki turn red and nearly set himself in flames, but he controlled them. He nodded for the answer and wondered what Iida would do after he confirmed it. Iida smirked and answered, "I will support you and try to help, but Izuku is a real airhead, so be ready to be disappointed at times." Todoroki smiled back and Iida continued with the smirk falling, "But if he doesn't want that and you hurt him, I will become your enemy, since I promised myself that I will protect him. Also I think the others knew about your feelings about Izuku, except Izuku himself, and probably think the same way as me." Todoroki shivered when he thought about hurting Izuku. "Don't worry Iida, I will not hurt him. That's what I like to hear." Iida replied. Nezu was wondering to tell Izuku's two friends about his quirk in a school day in his office in UA. Should he tell them the truth or lie to them? They thought it was strange that Izuku still didn't have a quirk after it had been 3 years since he was supposed to get one, and thought that he was quirkless. Nezu kept thinking that he should tell them, since they still treated Izuku the same even though they thought he was quirkless, but having a quirk that could get rid of others might be different from being quirkless. Nezu continued his thoughts, but there was a knock at his office door. It opened to reveal Aizawa. "Nezu, you still thinking about that?" he asked. The chimera nodded. "I don't know how they would react. I don't want Izuku to be lonely." Aizawa sighed. "Believe in them Nezu. If this continues, it would be like lying to them, and Izuku already feels guilty about not telling them. Also when they get older, they should be able to protect Izuku and he could go out." "I know, but should I tell the rest of the Todorokis?" asked Nezu. "It would be for the best. They could also protect Izuku, since Tuya is becoming a pro-hero, he should be able to protect him. It would only be fair to let them know as well. Izuku could go outside once you tell them and he would be happy. He hasn't been outside for 5 years, apart from the time he snuck out." Aizawa reasoned. "It's time for him to see the world again." Nezu sighed as he gave in. "Fine, I will tell them when they come over by the end of the week." Once the weekend hit, the whole Todoroki family and Iida came over. Nezu greeted them at the door like normal and they all had lunch, but what happened after lunch, it was abnormal. "Rei, can you and your family along with Iida stay here?" Nezu asked. "Sure, but why?" Rei answered. Nezu sighed and brought Izuku to the front. "I trust you and I want you to know a little secret about Izuku." Izuku's eyes widened and gulped. He didn't know that his father was going to spill up his secret, but he knew that it was for the best. He braced himself for what was going to happen next. Eyes were on him and Nezu brought the attention to himself. "Promise me that you will not treat him any differently," Nezu demanded. This surprised everyone, but Izuku. He knew how much his father cared for him and was grateful for it. "Why would we treat him differently?" asked Natsuo. "Just promise me," Nezu repeated. Rei replied, "It seems that it's important, so of course." Nezu and Izuku sighed. Nezu said, "Thank you. Now I will share with you Izuku's secret. You see, you know that Izuku's quirk didn't show up when he turned 4, the rest nodded and Nezu continued, Izuku was born with a quirk." There were gasps. "Why didn't you tell us Izuku?" They all screamed, except Rei. "I will explain that. Izuku was born with a quirk that is very dangerous in the wrong hands and people might treat him differently because of it. His quirk is called Deletion. Nezu said. What does it do? And why would he be treated differently? Questioned Iida. Nezu explained, his quirk can delete quirks permanently, so he might get treated differently because of that. Eyes widening, they faced Izuku who had his head lowered and looked sad. He was worried that he wouldn't have any friends after this, but as he was thinking Todoroki spoke up. It's okay. It doesn't matter as long as he doesn't delete quirks. I mean Izu is still Izu and he's our friend. Iida and the rest agreed. It made Izuku raise his head with tears in his eyes. You won't be scared of me? He asked. Rei smiled, of course not. You're our hero and I noticed that you always wear the bracelet on your wrist. I think it's a quirk-canceling bracelet, right? Nezu nodded. So we will be fine. Thank you for accepting my son for who he is, but I think it's time to let him outside. Nezu replied. There was another round of gasps, Izuku including. Really Papa? Izuku shouted. Yes, but you need to have people who know about your quirk around you at all times. Nezu explained. The others were giving confusion signs and he explained some more. Izuku, people are after you. Especially villains. Your mother left you in front of UA because you were born with deletion and because villains were after you. Villains killed your real parents Izuku and they left you in front of UA for protection. Izuku knew he was adopted, but didn't know why his real parents left him. He let tears fall down his cheeks and his friends noticed. Izu, you didn't know this? Todoroki asked as he hugged the crying boy. He shook his head. I knew that I was adopted, since we look nothing alike, but my real parents died because of me. It's okay Izuku, we will protect you. Iida comforted him. No, I don't want to get you in danger and die. Cried Izuku. Todoroki sighed, we will not be and die if we grow stronger and we want to protect you Izu, so let us. Izuku looked up and asked, will you change your minds? Nope. They exclaimed in unison. Izuku looked towards the rest of the Todoroki family and they nodded, showing that they will also do their part. Thank you. Izuku thanked as he smiled with tears in his eyes. Nezu smiled also along with the others. But Izuku is still quirkless to other people, okay. Also since Shoto and Tenya are still young, so some other person must be there also. They nodded and then their day went as normal. They all learned something new about Izuku and joined in the mission of protecting Izuku if the time ever came. They were determined to complete it and make sure that he was safe and happy, especially Todoroki and Iida. Chapter 12, UA. After getting more people into the Protecting Izuku mission, Izuku was allowed to go outside. He met many people and was so happy to wander around. The three friends would visit some places around the neighborhood and played around. There would always be an adult with them, or one of Todoroki's older siblings. Once outside, they tried to play with other kids, but they asked their quirks and since Izuku couldn't tell them the truth, he told them that he was quirkless. They laughed and bullied him, but his friends defended him. From that point the friends understood that people wouldn't be accepted for who they are, it would always depend on their quirk. They gave up on trying to become friends with other kids and only playing with themselves. Years later, Iida and Todoroki went through middle school and tried many attempts to help Todoroki with his own mission. But they failed because Izuku was too much of an airhead and a cinnamon roll. Todoroki still didn't give up and was still trying. Iida and Todoroki were entering UA High where they could see their green-haired friend every day and studied to become heroes. They completed the entrance exam with a breeze, thanks to the training from their family and friends and the tutor from Nezu and Izuku. Natsuo entered college, while Fuyumi was a teacher. Tuya became a hero with the name Dabi and the other caretakers continued to do their jobs. Rei stayed at home to look after the house, since her eldest children told her that she didn't have to work anymore. Izuku was still helping UA's staff and mostly taught Aizawa's class, since he was so lazy. Izuku enjoyed his jobs and was excited to become a student himself. Izuku was also taught how to fight, so that he could defend himself around villains, but Izuku trained harder in secret, since he didn't want to become a burden for his family and friends. Nezu didn't want Izuku to go to school because he wouldn't have an eye on him, but once he reaches the age of 16, he could go to high school. He would study at UA as Nezu's personal student, since he didn't need to learn the other stuff because he already knew it. Nezu arranged Izuku to be his personal student, but when they didn't have lessons, Nezu would give him a task or he could be with Class 1A, since Iida and Todoroki were there. Nezu trusted them and saw how hard they trained to become stronger to protect his little mouse. Well, he wasn't little anymore, but he was still his child. Everyone is the same height as the anime. It was the first day of Izuku's school life and he was excited. He put on his uniform and grabbed his backpack that had all the things he needed for school. "Papa, I'm ready," he shouted. "Okay, coming," yelled back Nezu. They walked out the door and headed towards UA. Izuku was bursting with energy. It was his first time going to school and he was going to meet many new people. He was wondering if they could be friends, but then remembered the people who bullied him for telling them he was quirkless. He sighed and shook his head of the bad thoughts. He had Iida and Todoroki with him, so he didn't need to worry. Before entering UA, Izuku asked his father, "Papa, can we not tell anyone we're related yet?" "Why?" Nezu questioned. Izuku answered, "Because I don't want anyone judging me because you're my papa. There might be bad people who want to get closer because of own personal gain." Nezu smiled and nodded. "Okay, that's smart, but I need to tell the other UA staff, so they won't expose you. It would also be ideal if you tell Tenya and Shoto." "Okay." Izuku agreed. "Also, Izuku, if people ask you why you are in UA, just say you're my personal student, since you are." "Of course Papa, I mean Nezu." Izuku sighed and continued, "This is going to be hard." Nezu laughed. "It's for the better." They walked into UA and Izuku headed to Class 1A's classroom by himself. Once he reached the classroom, there was no one there but a caterpillar. "Good morning Uncle Aizawa," greeted Izuku. Aizawa turned and said, "Hello kid. Welcome to my class, also don't say uncle. Nezu messaged that you didn't want people knowing your relationship with him." "Right, sorry uncle, I mean Aizawa-sensei." Izuku responded. I going to sleep and see if anyone can spot me, well not Todoroki and Iida, since I've done this many times with them." "Okay Aizawa-sensei." The broccoli replied. It was early, so Izuku had to wait for about an hour and appeared his friends. They walked into the classroom expecting that they would be the first one there, but then they spotted Izuku. He waved at them and they waved back. "Izuku, what are you doing here?" asked Iida. Izuku smiled and replied, "I'm in this class when I don't have tasks or lessons with Papa." Todoroki slightly smiled. "I guess we're classmates now." "Yep. You guys are stuck with me," Izuku said. They continued the chatter and more people entered the classroom. It was getting closer to the time where class starts and Izuku had to go. "I need to meet with Pa, Nezu. I will see you later." Izu. Why aren't you calling him your father?" asked Todoroki. Izuku whispered so that no one would hear him. "I don't people to judge me for my father and connections to pro-heroes, so I'm pretending that I don't know them personally." "Okay, we understand. We will see you later." Todoroki questioned. Izuku smiled as he walked out the huge door and nodded. The door closed behind him and people started to gather around the duo. "Hey, who was that person? Is he in this class?" a brunette girl asked. "Yes," Iida answered. "He looks so cute," a pink girl screamed. "I wonder if he's in a relationship." Todoroki glared at the pink girl and she shivered. Iida noticed and quickly patted Todoroki on the shoulder. Calm down. Iida ordered. Todoroki took breaths and let his glare off his face. Wow, scary. A blonde-haired boy said as the whole class sweat dropped after seeing the glare. Sorry about that. We are protective of him and we're his only friends. He is our only friend. Iida replied. Todoroki's face neutral and the bell rang. Everyone went to their seats, but were still chatting with each other. Sitting plans are the same, but instead of Mineta, Shinso is in 1A. There was one empty seat and people whispered about what they thought would happen to Izuku. Shut up. A voice ordered. The class froze and quieted down. That's better. You guys are too loud. A yellow caterpillar-looking thing came out of nowhere. People screamed. What is that? I don't know. What do we do? The caterpillar thing made an unzipping noise and revealed a hobo-looking man. The screams stopped at the sight of him. He sighed. I am your homeroom teacher, Shoto Aizawa. Get into the PE uniforms and meet me outside. He walked out of the classroom and the students followed his instructions. After changing, they met Aizawa outside and he complained about how slow they were. He announced that they would be doing a test and there was a lot of whining, but he also told them about a condition. The person who comes last will be expelled. He said. People called him unfair, but Aizawa did his whole speech about how the world was not fair and they did the test. The same results, but without Izuku. When the test finished he explained that he wasn't going to expel anyone. After the test, the students came up to Aizawa to ask him a question. Aizawa-sensei, will the green-hair boy do the test as well? Asked a black-haired girl. Aizawa faced her, and answered, no. Students were surprised and yelled, why? Simple. It's because he isn't really a hero course student. He's only in this class when he doesn't have his main lessons, also because he needs classmates, since he is the only student in his class. Aizawa explained. Then what's his main class? Asked a redhead. Iida answered, his main class is Class 1Z, also known as Nezu's personal class. There were gasps. What? Nezu's personal student. They shouted in unison. Todoroki nodded. Meanwhile, Izuku was watching the whole test. The test was for Aizawa to see if they had potential, but it was also a way for Izuku to analyze their quirks. Before, when Izuku had to go to Nezu's office, Nezu had a task for Izuku. It was to analyze the quirks of the first years. Aizawa was helping Izuku by doing the test earlier. Izuku was watching the test on a tree branch so that no one could see him, but Aizawa knew he was there. They did this every year and he could sense the boy, since he was an underground hero. Izuku mumbled quietly as he wrote down notes about the quirks he saw in a notebook. When he was done in Class 1A was going back to their classroom, Class 1B were going out of the building for their test. Izuku analyzed their quirks and when he was done he handed the notebook to his father and headed towards Class 1A. Once he entered the classroom, eyes were on him. His other classmates were in the middle of introductions and he was just in time for his turn. Hi. He waved. It's the broccoli boy. Screamed the girls, broccoli. He questioned. He faced towards his friends and they smiled while shaking their heads. He bowed to the class. Hello. I am Izuku. I will be a part of the class sometimes. Hi Izuku, I'm Mina. The pink girl exclaimed. I know. It's a pleasure to meet you in person. Izuku said. Mina and everyone was quite surprised. You knew, she asked. Yes, I was watching the test. It was a task my teacher gave me. Izuku explained. Oh, we've heard you were Nezu's personal student. I guess he asked you to do that. Uraraka commented. Izuku smiled brightly, correct. The whole class squinted. Too bright, the girls thought, precious cinnamon roll, must protect. Anyway, what's your quirk? asked Kirishima. The mood in the room immediately turned tense. Iida and Todoroki walked to Izuku and stood in front of him like something was going to happen. With his friend standing in front of him, he knew they would protect him, so he lied, "I'm quirkless." There was silence. Izuku had his head down, but there was a comment that made him look up. "That's so manly. You became Nezu's student without a quirk." Kirishima exclaimed. Bakugo added, "I guess an extra like you is smarter than these losers." "Hey!" shouted the rest of the class. Izuku smiled, "Thank you. See Izu, people at school are nice, but some are bad. Bakugo is a combination of both, but everyone is good." Todoroki said. Izuku faced Todoroki and smiled. "You're right, Sho-chan." Todoroki's face lit up red and everyone but Izuku saw the reaction. Girls were fangirling in their minds, while the boys smirked. Someone has a crush. Chapter 13, Alarm. It's been a month since Izuku started his high school life and he has made all his classmates his friends. There was also a little group called Izu Protection Squad, which the whole class 1A joined. The leaders of the squad was no other than Todoroki and Iida. There were other squads created, such as the Baku Squad and the Izu Squad. Baku Squad contained Bakugo himself, Kirishima, Kaminari, Mina and Shiro. The Izu Squad had Izuku, Uraraka, Azui, Shinso, Iida and Todoroki. They would normally be in those groups with other mini-groups. Izuku would jump in between classes and participated in hero training. Hero training was difficult since he didn't a quirk to use, but he trained harder. Hero costumes are all he same, including Izuku. Izuku also tried to get along with the other first-year students and was successful. There was an incident in the cafeteria. Izuku and his friends were heading over to the cafeteria for lunch, but was stopped by the infamous blonde of 1B. "Hey, if it isn't the so-called Class 1A." he greeted. Izuku replied, "Yes, it is Nito Monoma-kun. Nice to meet you." Monoma's smug smirk dropped. "How do you know my name? I never introduced myself." Izuku's eyes glistened. "It's because your quirk is so cool. You can copy other people's quirks for 5 minutes. It would become an advantage for heroes. But I suggest to do some combat training. Just in case you copy a close combat quirk, you would know how to fight with your fist. Or maybe, you can practice using guns and knives if you just in case need it." Izuku continued to mumble his thoughts out loud and quickly grabbed a notebook out of nowhere. His friend's sweat dropped and wondered where he got the notebook. Todoroki and Iida were sighing like it was normal, which caused them to sweat drop even more. Monoma didn't know what was happening, but was smirking since someone adored his quirk. He spoke. "He's not too bad. At least he is better than the others." He laughed, but then a big hand chopped his head. "I'm sorry about that." An orange-haired girl apologized. Also, Izuku stopped mumbling. "You're scary people." Izuku stopped mumbling and looked up from his notebook. "Sorry, Kendo-san. It's a habit," he replied. Kendo smiled. "It's fine, but where do you get the notebook from? Before your hands were empty." "I don't know." Izuku questioned himself with an awkward smile. As Kendo was about to respond, an alarming ring echoed through the building. Seniors were panicking and chaos appeared. Students were rushing out the door. Izuku was caught a senior's wrist and asked, "What's going on?" The third year yelled, "The alarm is for when UA has an intruder." "I have never experienced this in all my years here." Izuku thanked for the explanation and let go of the wrist. He explained to the others and looked out the window. All he just saw was the press. "Ten-chan. It's the press. We need to calm everyone down," he shouted. Iida shouted back, "What do you suggest we do?" "Uraraka-san. Make Ten-chan float and then he can yell on top of his lungs for everyone to calm down," Izuku ordered. Understanding, they followed out the order and commotion settled down. Iida was the exit sign and told everyone about the press being the cause. Once the commotion settled, the alarm was still ringing and Izuku thought it was weird. He thought, the press wouldn't just barge in UA and destroy the wall. It has to be someone else. Izuku pushed through the crowd trying to go somewhere. His friends were too busy congratulating Iida on his efforts to see that Izuku was walking away, but one person saw the green fluff go. Todoroki, feeling curious to where the broccoli was going, followed behind him. They reached to a room where a hooded person with gloves was coming out of. It showed suspicious and Izuku took out his phone and recorded the whole thing as he hid behind a wall. "What are you doing, Izu?" whispered Todoroki. Izuku was alarmed and was about to scream, but quickly covered his mouth. Once he saw who it was, he let go and continued recording. "Someone suspicious has entered UA and I'm getting evidence. Even though we have cameras in the school, it might be hacked, so I'm doing this," explained Izuku. Todoroki nodded. "Makes sense." They continued to record and follow the hooded person. Once they reached to the entrance of UA, they saw that the person walked through the UA gates, while he blended into the crowd. They couldn't follow any further, so they decided to go to Nezu's office. They knocked twice and entered the office. Nezu was there sipping his tea while scanning through documents. "Papa. I have something for you," Izuku said. Nezu looked up. "Oh, what is it?" Izuku placed his phone on the desk and played the whole recording. Nezu's brows frowned, and when the recording was done, Nezu looked up. "Thank you for doing this, Izuku. That room he came out of are where the records and documents are stored. I might have to look through the place." "Okay, we understand," Izuku replied. "We will probably head back to class now." Izuku and Todoroki gave their goodbyes to Nezu and exited the room. Walking through the hallways, it was empty. Todoroki took it as a chance to try and talk to Izuku. "So, Izu, what do you think of high school?" he asked. Izuku smiled warmly. "It's so nice. I feel bad for lying to them." Todoroki sighed. "It's for the best, Izu. But it's good that they treat quirkless people normally without bullying them." Izuku agreed. "They and you will become great heroes in the future. They all have a kind heart, even though Bakugo-kun can't really show it, but he cares. They have the power to save people and I hope they do just that." Todoroki responded, "You really have a big heart, don't you, Izu?" Izuku looked at Todoroki. "I guess. I really don't like people dying, but life always comes to an end, so let's make sure people don't lose their lives early." Todoroki nodded and opened the door of Class 1A. They entered the classroom and everyone was there. They asked about where they were and what they were doing. Izuku lied to them about going to the bathroom with Todoroki, so that they wouldn't worry about the intruder, but he planned to tell Iida, since Nezu was going to tell the teachers later. After lunch, Izuku had to go to the principal's office for his lesson. Instead of a lesson, he had a task. It was to check to see that all the documents were there. Everything was in the same place and he reported back to Nezu. He thought it was weird, but he had to be cautious. Why would they come here? Is it to gather information? Do they have a target? Did they take a photo of the document they wanted to see? Izuku had many questions, but he didn't tell his friends. He knew the UA should be extra cautious. He told his father opinion and his father agreed. Things would still be the same, but there will be more alarms. After school, Izuku told Iida everything and he noted that they would all have to be cautious. Little did they know, a surprise at a field trip was coming soon.